As many as 95% of people who go on diets put all the weight back on. That's absolutely nuts.
Over 80% of the population are overweight or obese. Over 40% are obese. Of the other 20%, half of them are probably skinny fat. Maybe 10% that have good body composition. That is just insane.
It's no surprise though, most diets are simply about cutting calories and they make you feel crappy from brain fog to low energy and headaches.
Your body is a bank account, it's a chemistry lab, and it's a history book. Meaning calories count, but where they come from counts more. Is it just weight we're looking at, or are we looking at health? Because you can lose weight and be less healthy.
But JJ Virgin, celebrity nutrition expert and fitness hall of famer, has a better way.
If you pull out gluten, dairy, eggs, corn, soy, peanut, sugar, and artificial sweeteners, show me an ultra-processed food you can eat. So basically what that diet forced you to do was eat real food. And people were blown away in such a short amount of time.
So if you're still dealing with stubborn weight gain, you're uncontrollable around sugar, you can't stop binge eating, and you want to know what foods you should actually be eating, stay tuned.
I am more excited about what I'm doing now than I've ever been.
Welcome to the Health Optimization Podcast. I'm Tim Gray. I'm the UK's leading biohacker. This podcast is all about gaining actual advice from the world's top experts and sharing new breakthroughs in nature, biohacking, technology, and longevity research to help you live longer and happier. Many people assume athletic bodies and good health are just for the young, that once you reach a certain age, it's all downhill from there. And worse than that, people who have been out of shape their whole life think that they're a lost cause after 40 and don't even bother trying. But I know from personal experience that it's not true. I'm in my mid-40s and healthier and stronger than ever, and I've only been training a few years. JJ Virgin specialises in helping people age 40 plus to lose weight and keep it off and look and feel better than ever. She's worked with the likes of Gene Simmons, Ben Stiller, Serena Williams, and has appeared on Dr. Phil, The Today Show, and many more. She's also the author of four New York Times bestsellers and hosts the Well Beyond 40 podcast, which has over 20 million downloads. JJ's all about aging powerfully, and she shares some incredible insights in this conversation, so I hope you enjoy. So JJ, I'm super happy to have you here, and thank you. Welcome to the show.
I know, here in London.
I know. Can't believe we made it happen.
I'm thrilled about the whole experience so far in London with you.
How did this all start for you?
I have been interested in weight and body composition since I was a teenager, like literally. So that means I've been focusing on this now for nearly 50 years, which is just craziness. Like I wanted to be a Broadway actress and dancer. So I started studying nutrition when I was 12. Yes. Wow. Which means I had to go to libraries and health food stores. And I started counting calories and looking at macros and all of that stuff way back when. But how the food intolerance, which really when you look at it is kind of like the earliest form of biohacking, right? What I do with all of my programs is I help people connect the dots between what they're eating, how they feel, what they weigh and what that weight's made up of. And what had happened was I was on Dr. Phil for 2 years and we were using his book. It was like the ultimate weight loss solution or something. I didn't really agree with most of the book. It was eat 6 meals a day, eat super low fat. They were having literally crazy cereal with skim milk, that kind of stuff. But there was the final chapter in the book was weight loss resistance. And it really just related to insulin resistance. But I was able to pull that chapter with all the challengers that I was working with and say, oh, you are weight loss resistant. So we can't really do exactly how the book says. Mm-hmm. So it's how I was able to modify things. But then I thought, well, what are all the different things that could get in the way of someone losing weight? And really when I say weight, I'm saying fat. Or cause them to gain fat. And as I started to dig into it, I was like, we didn't know gut microbiome back then, but, there's gut issues and inflammation and toxins and hormones. And as I dug into that, I started teaching a course to doctors. And in the course to doctors, I was using a food sensitivity test as one of the ways to uncover inflammation and gut problems. And what would happen was I looked at so many of these test interps. And, you would send the test into the lab and it would take a couple weeks to come back. Well, in the meanwhile, you have to give that patient or client something to do, right? Otherwise they gave you money and they're upset. So what I taught everyone to do was get them on, have them take the test. And then what I saw when I looked at all these labs is I went, oh, on IgG food testing, it's always eggs and dairy, and then it's corn, soy, peanuts. And gluten causes leaky gut, which is causing the problem. So I'll just pull out gluten, dairy, eggs, corn, soy, peanuts. And so for a good year, that's what I was doing. Then I discovered that if you pulled those out, they would eat all the sugar, which messed their gut microbiome up worse. So then I pulled out sugar and artificial sweeteners. And what started to happen was people would come back in 3 weeks, they'd feel so much better. Like literally, the average person lost 7 pounds the first week. Granted, they were depleting glycogen stores, et cetera, and bloat. But, so that's where we got dropped 7 pounds just 7 days. But everyone was feeling so much better. I was like, we really don't actually need to do the test. We could just go back and have them do a pure elimination diet and go back and, try the foods, see how they go. So that's where that whole thing came from.
Interesting. So at the beginning, did you think it was just a calories in and calories out equation?
So when I was in grad school, we were taught a couple crazy things. Number one, we were told to not have anyone lift weights until they lost the weight. One really bad, yeah, right? And I was one of the first personal trainers, me, Mark Sisson, Tony Horton, Body by Jake. And, what I recognized really quickly was that I wasn't getting paid to make people worse. And that resistance training basically changed the metabolic equation versus trying to do cardio all the time. And so what we were taught alongside that was, you have to eat less, exercise more. Now, granted, I said for years, your body's not a bank account, it's a chemistry lab. I've kind of looked back and went, your body is a bank account, it's a chemistry lab, and it's a history book. Meaning calories count, but where they come from counts more. They do have a metabolic effect. Then you have this chemistry lab of hormones and toxins, so that matters, and gut microbiome. And then you have the history book of really storing those toxins and having that toxic burden of anything, or the trauma, or your genetics. So you have all of these things that you have to think about.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So one of the things you just said about the genetics aspect is that obviously, I remember early days, probably about 2011, when the first microbiome tests started becoming popular, or should I say, just appearing on the market, and they're expensive. And then, kind of like 2014, I guess, methylation, the MTHFR gene, and how that affects metabolism is very interesting. So the genetics part of, for me, actually was really interesting because my metabolism was much slower when I was slower at methylating. And as soon as I optimized that, obviously I'm thin anyway, but the weight where I store fat in my body changed significantly just from having methylfolate B12 and trimethylglycine. It's a significant shift. So it's just quite funny how we can now, with what we learned from the microbiome of how you get the nutrients from your food and how much of the nutrients or whatnot you get from your food, and things like methylation, speeding up your metabolism. It's insane how much we've learned in the last 10 or 12 years alone. It's just...
Yes, it is. And, and yet... there are still some of the basics that just prevail. I think that where we start to use all that fine-tuning is you do the foundational things. You dial them in, because that really is going to help you uncover whether it's weight loss resistance or other issues. Like if you're not doing any of the foundational stuff right, how do you know that it's a methylation problem or that you just need to go to sleep, right? Or you need to stop eating all the ultra-processed food.
But it's actually funny because I recorded with Dr. Sachin Panda recently. I mean, Sachin's fantastic.
Oh my gosh, he's incredible.
He really is. He's fantastic. And one of the things that we discussed was that depending on the timing of your food, when you eat, your insulin response changes depending on the time of day.
Yep. So, and you'll see it in a CGM. I don't usually eat late at night, but something happened. We ate at 9 o'clock at night, go to bed at 10, wake up in the morning. My little Oura ring first says, looks like you ate late last night. I'm like, how did you know that? The CGM, my blood sugars pumped up because, my pancreas had gone to sleep. I was not wanting to deal with carbs at 9 o'clock at night. So, yes, it all matters. Eat during the eat during the daylight.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's really interesting how the timing plays such a big part into this, as well as the genetics, as well as the microbiome.
I do think, though, like if you look at some of the genetics, there are night owls and early birds, and I think that would play into when you're going to eat too. I mean, if I was going to skip a meal, it would always be dinner. I'm not one of those people. I know people can skip breakfast, not me. 2 hours into it, I'm going to have to go eat something.
Yeah, I mean, you're an avid, you work out a lot.
I work out consistently.
Yeah, okay. That's
consistently and effectively.
It's actually a really interesting line. So this is something that Dr. Dom Nischwitz, a biological dentist friend of mine, and one of our speakers, he taught me was consistency.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'd worked out sporadically and this, that, and the other, and ate well sporadically,
and had sporadically good health.
Yeah, and it's just never right. And it's like actions speak louder than words. However, consistency speaks louder than both. And this line actually helped change me in terms of my working out and my eating.
And hopefully your life, because it's not just relevant to eating, right? It's that great line I heard from John Assaraf. It's the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And really, to be successful, it's like one of the simplest things, like show up on time and be consistent.
Yeah. Tidy desk, tidy mind. That's I would say is how you do one thing is how you do it. That's a great line. So where did your idea of aging powerfully come from?
Oh, I'm so excited about this. I got to tell you, I am more excited about what I'm doing now than I've ever been. And I feel like it's really like everything I've done up to this date is research and development. So, 40 years professionally doing this, all of the things, especially a lot of my graduate and doctoral work in exercise science, it's like all coming together now. But, as I started to look, well, the first thing that happened is a couple of years ago, I've always been the jar opener in the house. I've never had to ask someone to open a jar. And a couple of years ago, I'm opening a jar and I can't open the jar and I didn't think anything of it. And I hand it over to my son, who opens the jar with ease. And I'm like, I must have loosened it, right? Then it happens again, and then it happens again, and I'm like, what is going on here? And I started to really dig into all the statistics with aging, which I think are really much more the sedentary aging muscle stats. But, they talk about starting around age 30, we start to lose up to 1% of our muscle mass each year, but that's really not the issue. It's the 2 to 4% strength. 6 to 8% power. That grip strength is such a good proxy for overall strength. And you have that study that came out that looked at over 2 million people and found that the people with the lowest quartile of grip strength had the highest all-cause mortality. So I'm looking at all that stuff. And then I'm hearing there was a meme going around the internet, like after the age of 30, I think it was like, 5% of people will ever sprint again. And I'm looking at this and I think, okay, you know what? First of all, I am one of those people that if they say, you can't do that, I'm running straight into whatever it is you just told me I couldn't do. So when I started to hear all this stuff, I'm like, okay, we're going to prove this. We're going to prove this wrong. And then I started to dig into it and go, well, what really is happening as we age? Is it that really your muscle, you are starting to lose muscle and this has to happen? Or is it more lifestyle? Now, women have less fast twitch muscle fibers than men to begin with. So you have slow twitch and fast twitch, as you know, and then you have the ones in between that could go either way. And this is an important thing because as we age, and it just made sense. I hadn't found the research yet, but I go, we must be losing our fast twitch muscle fibers. If we're losing strength, we're losing vertical jump, that's fast twitch. And it would make sense because if you are starting to walk instead of run, right? Do Pilates instead of heavy weights. What are you doing? You're going to preferentially take the fibers that could either be fast or slow and have them go to slow while you're also losing muscle fibers, which are the fast twitch. You're really screwing yourself. And so when you really look at what fast twitch fibers do and what you lose the most of, it's your power. And that's where aging powerfully came from. It started out as it's time for us to really focus on building those fast twitch muscle fibers. They're the ones that are really capable of hypertrophy. They're the ones that are going to help with insulin sensitivity. They're the ones we can pack the carbs into as glycogen. So let's do that. But then I'm at these conferences talking about this. And literally, I'm at a conference in New York City, the Integrative Healthcare Symposium. I'm talking about women taking creatine, optimizing protein to overcome anabolic resistance, living hefty things. And I said, what do you think the big concern women have with this is? And it's like, and everyone said, I don't want to get big, right? And this little woman over here goes, but I don't want to get big. And she's a little puffball. And I'm thinking, and I just said, you know what I said? Get big. Mm-hmm. Get big. You should be more concerned about being a little fluff ball. Like, you really actually want to be at your heaviest at your right size, mm-hmm. right? So you wouldn't want to be that size and light. You want to be a heavyweight.
So yesterday I hung out with your husband, Tim.
He's a great guy.
Oh, man. What
great name, too.
Yeah, the Tims. Actually, one thing that he said that really, really struck a chord with me, which I thought was awesome, was that how he plays sports every single day. And often with people that are 30 years old and he wipes the floor with them. You know, it brings me on to, you know, like actually perfectly into the question that I have, which is, you know, why do so many people think there's no hope for us past 40 when it comes to health and fitness? Now, I mean, Tim actually told me yesterday about this, but I'd love you to share with the audience.
So it's interesting. We, you know, they talk about how you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with. And so you're like, okay, I might need to upgrade some things here. I think that, and the other adage of don't be the smartest person in the room. Mm-hmm. So here's our rule of thumb for if we're going to go to a class. We don't want to be the fittest person in the room or the youngest person in the room. And the funny thing was, we started doing yoga because I was like, we have to start doing yoga. Because one of the things you also gets lost is balance and flexibility. Mm. I will not do that on my own. I will go lift heavy weights. So we're in the yoga class and we're going to a big gym in Florida. And the average age in there is probably 75 and it's about half men. I feel like I'm a great yogi because the bar is very low, right? Then we go to Encinitas, California, which is the yoga capital of the world. And I just sign us up for a hot yoga class, pay no attention. We get in there and we got the floor cleaned with us. And we're like, okay, this is time. So then I look at this and I go, you know, honey, when I decided I was going to be in the best shape of my life at 60, now I started lifting weights when I was 16. I was running track. I was doing point ballet, like gymnastics, all actually the wrong sports for a 6 foot tall person, except for the track. But I've always been fit. I've always worked out. And I'm a ridiculously naturally lean person. Like I'll sit around 10%. If I'm focused on it, I might creep up to 14%. At 39, I did a DEXA scan to check my body composition, and I was 13.9% and 154 pounds. And so at 59, I told Tim, I go, we're going to go get DEXA scans so that we can start doing this. And he goes along with anything, pretty much. So we go in. My DEXA at 59. Now, I will tell you, I knew I was going in for this. So I actually focused. I gained a little bit of weight, which, you know, I had to do the mental female, oh my God, I'm getting, because I knew I wanted to just push some muscle. And I went in, I was 154 and 13.9% body fat. And this is a very important thing because when you look at most people as they age, they may weigh the same, but their body is not the same, you know? Because if you are not watching this, you're losing muscle, gaining fat, and you would never be able to tell that from a traditional scale. So Tim's weighed the same weight he's always weighed. He goes in to get a DEXA scan. Now, women have 10 to 15%, 10 to 13% fat we need to have to survive, and men have 3 to 5%. Men are going to be naturally leaner than their female counterparts, or should be. So Tim is 25% body fat. I was so glad I didn't have to say anything. The DEXA said it. And he's like looking at this and I'm like, uh-oh. And I didn't want to say, hey, you know, you cannot have higher, like you cannot be 15% higher body fat than me. And the crazy thing is, he was eating healthy, I'd give him a B. He was exercising, I'd give him a B. He was doing it, but he was kind of phoning it in, right? This kicked his butt. And he got on creatine. He started tracking his food. I do a little bit of one-on-one work. If you won't track, I will not work with you. You know, we started tracking, getting DEXAs every couple months. He kicked it way up in the gym. And in 8 months went from 25% down to 10% body fat. And the craziest part of that is he went from 27 pounds of fat he dropped, put on 24 pounds of muscle. Weight's basically the same. He lost 3 pounds. He went down like 2 waist sizes. I mean, he's never looked like this in his life, literally. Like he has never looked like this. He is leaner, more ripped, more fit. And now he is playing beach volleyball, and he is with people half his age.
Yeah, it's really funny you say that he'd go along with anything. So yesterday, I took him for EBO2 over at Nutri Clinic. And it's quite funny.
He had no idea what he was doing, by the way. I'm like, hey, you want to go do this with Tim? Sure.
It's like, that's the thing, is like, I didn't know what I was getting myself in for. It was like, yeah, and he's lying there with both arms out, having blood drained out of one arm, filtered and treated with those, and then put back in. He was just like grinning. I didn't know what I got myself into, but thank you, mate. So you shared a stat recently that 11% of the population between 50 and 60 have sarcopenia, obesity. Can you tell us what that is and why that is so worrying?
Yeah. So I talked about how we're losing muscle and we're losing strength and we're losing power, which those are the most disconcerting. And so how you would see that is in the loss of muscle, which is sarcopenia. Now, what you wouldn't know if you were just using a scale and not a bioimpedance scale or a DEXA scan is you would have no way of knowing this. You know, you might feel a little soft. I can tell. I can use, basically we had to do a lot of skin fold calipers and body composition tests in grad school, so I can do it with my fingers. It's a great party trick. But, you know, most people cannot tell. They go, oh, well, my weight's always been the same, right? But it's that gradual loss of muscle until all of a sudden you didn't realize how much you lost that is also, when you think of it, like we're looking at blood sugar, but blood sugar is a lagging indicator of insulin resistance. And when we look at muscle mass, when I look at someone who's got poor muscle mass, you can almost assuredly say, oh, you probably have osteoporosis too. So then you look at this 1-2 punch of the frailty of not being able to walk up the stairs, not being able to get off the toilet, all of that. But there's the other scary statistic in there where now you've got poor muscle mass, poor reaction time, can't catch yourself, your bones are frail because those two go hand in hand. And if you break your hip after the age of 65, that chance that you will actually survive, it's like 50% of the people never come back to where they were before, and 30% die within a year. It is absolutely frightening.
Crazy.
You know, and you look at so much of this stuff, and it's preventable. But right now, like we have these guidelines in the United States of 150 minutes of exercise a week. And so they count in walking. And to me, walking should not count as exercise. And people get so mad at me when I say this, but I go, exercise is when you do more than what you're used to so your body adapts. Walking is like flossing. You know, you do it every single day. You need to have that minimum step count. And then you add in the resistance training on top of it. But if you don't discern between those, people think that their 30-minute walk now all of a sudden counts for their hard work, and they're not building any muscle.
I mean, I think I completely agree. Actually, it's very interesting because in the last year I've been working on my body composition, or should I say, you know, my health actually. And I actually heard a thing about how muscles are actually part of our endocrine system.
And our immune system. So I like to say that there are metabolic spanks in our sugar sponge. So when you really look at it, I don't know what the statistics are here, but in the U.S. it's somewhere between 6.8 and 12% of the population is actually considered to be metabolically healthy. But when you look at the statistics of what they consider metabolically healthy to be, that's not it. Like if you really put the right guidelines in place, it would probably be more like 5%. And in the States, we've got now 80% of the population, over 80%, are overweight or obese. Over 40% are obese. Of the other 20%, the prediction is that only half of them are probably skinny fat. So you have maybe 10% that have good body composition. Like that is just insane because muscle is the fastest way to improve your metabolic health. It's going to be a little sponge for the carbs that you eat. So it gives carbs a great place to land. It's the easiest place to restore insulin sensitivity. And it also improves immune function, which we don't even think about, which we should be thinking about.
It's funny you say this, actually, because for years, because I dealt with a lot of health issues, and they'd been going on 10, 12 years roughly. And energy, I was always in an energy deficit. I was always like, for instance, you know, Dave's CoQ10 with PQQ, unfair advantage, always worked so well for me. Anything that helped my mitochondria worked very well for me. And I always felt like I was in an energy deficit. So working out or pushing myself, I was like, well, I'm using up more than I've got, and therefore I'm going to get sicker. So in the last year, and I've worked with Body Lab and Callum over there, where I've been working out every 48 hours up to 72 hours maximum and working out routinely. And one thing I've noticed is that some days I can't even walk up the stairs to get out of the gym. I'm just like, I'm spent. Like, I've pushed myself past the red zone on purpose. I don't get sick from it. Whereas when I wasn't exercising, I was getting sick from any exertion. So it's just funny how my body has responded so well. And I'm 45 now, and I would say I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm the best energy of my life.
And continuing to improve.
Yeah, and I love that. And it's just crazy because, obviously the common misconception is that people get worse and worse as they get older. Opposed to
I'm
pushing
flipping
better
that one. We are getting better and better because you know what? Especially you still have kids coming, so this will be at some point.
Fingers crossed.
But for a lot of us, like all of a sudden you have a little more time than you used to. Like once you have kids, you will then appreciate empty nest later. But you have time. But the big thing that I think we have to take on as we age is that your margin for error goes down. You can't get away with the things you did in your teens or 20s, but you're also smarter than that anyway. So there's that piece too. But you need to really be consistent and do more. And you need to make sure that all of the foundational things, sleep, some kind of mindfulness practice, the diet part of it, and the workout part of it have to be dialed. Like they have to be dialed. But the crazy thing, as you saw with fitness, for some reason, years ago, I got a client, and then all of a sudden I had all these clients who were in the chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue. They were like in a group together. I was like, get me out of this one. But I put them onto workout programs because no one would do it. They all were like, oh, you should rest. I'm like, no, they should not rest. That is not what they should do. They got to get this moving again. It's like the less you do, the less you can do. And the more you do, the more you can do. You just have to know how much to push it. And think of exercise in the definition. Exercise is doing more than what you're used to, so your body adapts and gets better. So if you're used to very little, then it might be, I'm working with someone right now who started at 385 pounds. We're at like 355 now. And for him, squatting over the side of a couch, like this high, doing 10 of those is a workout, right? Doing push-ups against this is a workout. So we're just doing doses all throughout the day, small, consistent things. And same with the steps. The average American is getting somewhere between 2,500 and 4,000 steps a day. Like that is pathetic. And by the way, low androgens are associated with anyone getting 4,000 steps or less a day. So all this, testosterone therapy, I'm like, they wanted to put him on it. I go, he's doing 2,500 steps a day and he's insulin resistant. Why don't we fix that? That's why the problem is, it's not. I
mean, this is an area I've tested very closely actually, because my testosterone was always like kind of mid-low. And then when I started working out, it went high, very, very high. And it was the best of my life. I'm testing TRT myself at the moment just to see, how it affects me. But it's very interesting because I heard that when you do deadlifting, it's almost like an evolutionary hack in terms of extra growth hormone and improving your testosterone levels naturally just from lifting and deadlifting.
Yeah.
And it's funny how the body does adapt, and yet we're taught, conventional thinking is that the body like falls apart and doesn't adapt, but in fact it always adapts. If you cut your hand in the same place several times, it scars and the skin gets tougher. It adapts, and it's the same with what you don't use, you lose.
Yeah. We, when I was in doctoral school, it was in exercise physiology, nutrition, and aging. And we had 80 and 90-year-old master athletes coming in there. And I'm like, holy smokes, they were amazing. Yeah. And so I think the takeaway there is, you can start at any age, and whenever it is that you're starting is great. Start. Like, don't say, oh, it's too late for me. I see that all the time. Is it too late for me? No, it's not too late. It's too late when you're taking the dirt nap. Up until then, not too late. But the more, right now, my biggest focus for myself is to get as good of a VO2 max and as much muscle mass as possible. So that when the day comes that I start to lose a little bit, or if something happens where, you can't do something for a couple of weeks, you're not decimated because of it.
I just want to share something quickly, actually, about this. You say about the VO2 max. So in February, I went to India, and there was a retreat centre called Awio, and it's a longevity lab, 5-star hotel, but with a lab next door. And they do DEXA scans, the grip strength test, full body MRI, DEXA scans, it's hearing tests, eye tests, ultrasounds of all the organs. I mean, it's a full 360. It's pretty incredible, actually. They put me on the VO2 max 15-minute, stress test run, and last time I did it, I was 32, not in age, in terms of my.
Oh, I was like going, you were 32.
No. I must have been about 36 when I did it last. 37. This time. And I'd been practicing nose breathing, not mouth breathing, so mouth taping. I'd been using a rebounder, mouth tape, so I was forced to breathe through my nose. I'd been working out, all of these things, and my score was 61. And they were shocked. I mean, the whole time I was running, even at full exertion, I was nose breathing. And whereas before I couldn't even rebound at the beginning. And so I saw them looking at each other while I was doing it. I was like, oh man, I've got such a bad result. 61, and they were like, this is 19 to 21-year-old athlete level.
Nice.
And I just could not believe it. And that's that is from working out and from nose breathing and eating even better. I just think it's really interesting about what you say about getting the basic things right. I often talk about the fundamentals of health. And that comes from Dr. Ted Akikoso originally, is eat well, sleep well, hydrate well, sun well, ground well, earth well, love well, relate well, forgive well, all the basics. Yeah. And I asked this group of biohackers out to rate themselves on a 1 to 10. And there was a room of 50 biohackers, pro, some very well-known ones. And out of 120 possible points, the average score was 48 on the fundamentals. And yet they're popping 50 to 70 tablets.
I think that before you get to do any of the stuff, this is what I think of it like. You're going to go buy a car. You go in. So I just bought a new car. And before I went even into the showroom, I knew how long the battery lasts. I knew the different types of styles. I knew the safety ratings. I knew if the stupid camera could see if I was going to pull in over a cement block, because that's how I totaled my last car. I knew all this stuff. Then when I know all of those things, the value, how it's going to get repaired, everything else, then I can go in and go, ooh, pretty interior. But I think a lot of us go in and go, I want to see the interior. What do the rims look like? What color paint job? And they forgot that their engine or their battery, they just bought a battery that lasts 50 miles instead of 400. So that's what I look at this and I go, until you have your diet dialed in, and you've got the right amount of protein, you've figured out which foods work for you, which foods don't, you're looking at calories, you're seeing if you are going to do caloric restriction, you've got, your bumpers around your time-restricted feeding, then you look at any basic nutrient deficiencies. I don't see things like vitamin D as biohacking or optimizing an omega-3, looking at your fiber. Then you get your movement dialed. Don't hack your exercise and try to do it in 5 minutes a week. That's not going to work. That is ridiculous. Get your sleep dialed, get some meditation, then, and then the relationships, the sunlight, all the basics. Why are we going out and spending $10,000 on a machine when we probably wouldn't need it if we just walked out in the sun?
I really enjoy hearing you say this, because when I recorded with Jim the other day and he was talking about brain health and cognition and what makes you smarter and think better and all these things, he was talking about the fundamentals, but it weren't labeled as the fundamentals. And now you're saying the same thing. And it's the game changers, the people that really have it dialed in for many years, such as yourself, I think you said.
Well, because we didn't have these. Yeah. 30 years ago, there was no red light. And, occasionally I'd take a cold shower by accident or get a sauna out at something. I mean, now, and I have the toys. I have red light and hyperbaric and saunas and stuff. But if I'm short on time, that's not where I'm spending it. That comes after I've done great sleep, exercise, I'm eating correctly, I'm making sure I'm getting the water intake. All of those things come first. I'm not trying to hack my way around those things. And I take real issue with things like trying to hack your sleep or hack your workourt. That is ridiculous.
Do it properly. I mean, I say optimize, which is always to improve. Hack, unfortunately, kind of in the UK, it's almost, someone can be a hack, or it can be to do a shortcut without. Right. And I think this is the one thing that doesn't do biohacking a service, actually, because of that negative connotation, even though biohacking is fantastic.
We'll call it helped optimizing. I think you're spot on that, because that's what's always bugged me, because I'm like, these are not things that you shortcut.
Yeah, and I agree, actually. It's where I come to after being in this space, I guess, for nearly 12 years.
48 out of 120.
Yeah.
Did you happen to be able to tell like where their biggest deficiencies were?
I didn't go into that detail. They asked me to do a talk like off the cuff, and I was just like, I'm in front of all these like really smart guys, and I'm not the most detailed biohacker. I like to collect the data and then put it to an abstract and then communicate it so that people can understand it. Like my mum in the audience, for instance. This is my...
I love your mum, by the way.
She is magical, my mum. Yeah, and so I did it off the cuff, and I wrote down these 10s and asked them to do it. These 12 things, sorry. And then one of the things I said was, I don't believe in supplementing too much unless you've got these right. The guy that runs the clinic is a big fan of supplementing, and then so he moved on very quickly, as in like, let's
I think one of the things we always say is you can't supplement a bad diet. And then this study came out in the States where they used supplements with McDonald's to show that they could reduce some of the oxidative stress of the food. And I'm like, great, I'm just going to ignore that one. But maybe we just don't eat the McDonald's, we wouldn't need those supplements. I think there's some foundational supplements though, but I don't count them I don't count them as the kind of fun ones. I count them as you better have these because these are orthomolecular.
So it's funny that the highest rate of prostate cancer in the world is by African men in the northern hemisphere, and they say this is because of the vitamin D. And vitamin D and vitamin K for me is one of the most fundamental things for the whole body, especially for healing teeth and bones and immune function and fixing your gut and things like that. But it's funny you mentioned creatine.
Well, because it's an orthomolecular too. Really, your body makes it. You should be getting some from your food, but we're not eating carpaccio and sashimi. So, and women have 70 to 80% of the tissue stores of men. And if anything, we need more of it. So, that's one of them, I think, is a foundational supplement, especially because you've got women who are now trying to be more plant-based. They're eating less. They don't eat enough protein. They're definitely not eating raw meat. So,
it's funny that creatine has become a staple of mine. I do 5 grams every morning. I've tested up to 20 grams, but it's actually really interesting because at the conference, there's a brand called Love Life Supplements. And this is where I get my creatine from and my collagen. No affiliation, by the way, but they had lozenges of creatine, one gram. So it's like a mint. And they're clean, and it's like actually, so you can, because of the half-life of creatine, which is 3 hours, actually having it sustained throughout the day instead of popping a tablet every 3 or 4 hours or whatever, you can have a lozenge. It's a mint.
Yeah,
I'm
playing around. I'm really digging into it because I'm about to come out with a really cool creatine product. So I've been messing with creatine and how best to dose it and what to do. It's great for jet lag. It's great if you are, I think we were going to go back out to your dinner the other night, and I was like, I could totally lie down right now and crash. And so I took a hit of Mitopure and creatine and was great and went out, So if you need some energy, think about what creatine does. It's going to be the creatine of phosphocreatine. That's the quick, bursty energy. So it's fantastic to do, but it's also great. Your brain, your brain on creatine's a beautiful thing. Like you can think straight, you're happy. So
there's a study that came out a few weeks ago that was, I think it was if you have 20 grams, the cognitive benefits are significantly greater than, and so I can't remember who was telling me.
There's more confusion around creatine. I just met with the guy who became obsessed with creatine as a scientist and a business guy. And turns out creatine monohydrate, 85% of it is not absorbed. Only 15% is, which can lead to some of that extracellular fluid. So some of these doses I'm now playing around with. I still use creatine monohydrate, but I'm playing around with creatine HCl because you can use 1/7 of the dose and it's all, none of it is excreted. So the dosing is going to depend on the type you're getting. The studies on women in depression, it was either 10 or 20 grams as well. But some, because of the fact that so much is excreted, it can cause some GI stuff. With my son with his brain injury, I hammered him. He still uses a lot of creatine every day.
So, actually, one thing I heard fairly recently, and I don't know, I hadn't heard it before, but creatine being one of the end products of methylation. And so in terms of energy production and detoxification, so it's almost like bypasses a lot of the methylation processes. So it's a really good shortcut, especially if you have the MTHFR or MTRR or one of the
40%. I always say, assume you do unless you don't. And, the great thing with creatine is biggest complaint people have is that they hurt or they're tired, right? So you just fix tired and you can actually feel it. Like you can feel it.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, you've spoken about the myths actually around creatine. Can you debunk them for us?
Well, the concern about creatinine, I think, is important because I get that one every single week about it being hard on your kidneys. And you got to realize it's going to be an elevation in creatinine that's not a pathological elevation. So there's pathological and non-pathological. Pathological would mean that you also could look at your other kidney markers and they'd be problematic. If they're not, then this is just a false elevation that doesn't matter whatsoever. There was one study that was like poorly done, showed some rise in DHT and some hair loss in 20-year-old males. It's never been replicated. There's nothing on it. So that one's a BS one too. And what are the other big ones? It's hair, it's kidneys.
Sleep is one.
Sleep?
Yeah. So...
Well, I don't know that I take it right before bed, although even the creatine expert I just had on was like, well, we're using it before bed. I'm like, huh. All right, well.
Well, I actually had Ben Greenfield talk about this once on an episode, must have been like 5 or 6 years ago. And it was about people saying that creatine is bad for sleep, right? Now, the interesting thing was, and Ben drilled into it as Ben does, it's super detailed. But he was like, well, actually, it's not that it ruins your sleep. Your energy production is better and therefore you need less sleep. So
that's interesting.
It seems like it's interfering with your sleep, but it's actually not.
I just know the jet lag thing is a definite, this is what I'd read it. So I was like, I'm bringing it right with me as soon as we get up in the morning because I knew we had a flight that was an odd flight. Like usually if you're doing a red eye, you want your red eye to be like 10, 11 hours. And so if your red eye's 8 hours, you're like, huh. And we left at 7, so you're not going to bed at 8. So I'm like going, okay, this is going to be a 4-hour situation. So I just used creatine. I literally, everyone was talking about jet lag. We didn't do jet lag. We're just not doing it.
I love that. I mean, it really is. And I love that it's come up like this actually in the podcast because it really is one of my favorite supplements.
I want it to be every woman's favorite supplement that women, and if a woman's listening and they're afraid of it, I just say dose it throughout the day, do that titration like you talked about so that you won't feel it. Or if you're feeling like you are retaining, try the HCl version of it. You need 1/7 of it, and kind of the dose there is 750 milligrams is foundational, and then use another 750 if you're going to go do something.
I'm gonna check that out. Actually, I think that it sounds great. I'd love to test that. I do carry it everywhere I go, even though the bottle is bloody huge. Because obviously creatine is quite a large volume, and you got to take like 5 to 10 capsules of it. But I carry it everywhere with me. It's actually so good, so good. And actually, I did content on Instagram recently about why creatine is great, not just for bodybuilding, but also for longevity and energy
cognition.
Production. Yeah, I'm glad we're in alignment on that one. So if you do have everything else dialed in, what anti-aging supplements would you recommend other than creatine?
All right. Well, I love collagen.
Yeah.
I think about 15 grams of collagen a day. No, it's not going to build muscle. I know that. It's not a complete protein. So I use bone broth protein because it's 80% collagen. But I'm using it for my hair, skin, nails, my joints, cartilage, tendons, ligaments. So I think it's super important there. So I love collagen. I'm a big fan. Now, I've been using these 2 companies' products for years, and I just became a spokesperson for both of them, literally. And both of them were like, hey, you should do this. Finally, I was like, all right, this is really ridiculous. Like, how many years in have I been like obsessed with your products? So one of them is Qualia. Yes. And we've been using their senolytic for years, which I think is super cool. You take it twice a month. It's got 9 different senolytic compounds. So it's going after all these different zombie cells. And the research is really cool with things like arthritis. Now, both Tim and I trashed ourselves when we were younger doing dumb things. So, I definitely noticed. It was interesting because when I was talking about what I noticed, it's actually, what I notice is what I'm not doing. So we both used to get up out of a chair and go, oomph, and now we don't oomph anymore. And I use their NAD+, which is a niagen and niacinamide and niacin blend. So totally feel that. That was another one I had when I landed. I was like, took some NAD+. And then I'm also obsessed with Timeline Mitopure. And and I like to do one thing at a time to see what I feel. That one you totally notice when you go to the gym. Oh my gosh. But I just did a podcast with their chief medical officer, and I'm like, I need to take more. So I was like, basically went shopping at their booth. And that was the stuff I took when I was kind of dragging that night and had to go out with the creatine. I'm like, wow, it is amazing. And when you think about it, people fast, they do these things because they want to trigger autophagy, and then MitoPure is going to help with mitophagy, cleaning out the mitochondria. And it just goes along so well with exercise. Like in the statistics they have with what happens when you take this in terms of your muscles, it's like your muscle strength, it's like 30% increase.
Yeah, it's fantastic. That MitoPure, actually, I mean, again, it's not a plug or no affiliation. They do exhibit at the conference, but I remember when urolithin A was, it was buzzing around everywhere, and then they came out with Timeline Nutrition whey protein as well with urolithin A in it, which is, I don't know if you've had their whey protein.
I have it at home. I have not had it.
It's phenomenal. It is literally, I don't know how they make it so good, and it is clean. It is so tasty. Now, I have a hack where I actually add a sachet of the urolithin A specifically into it as well.
So you get 1,000 instead of 500?
Yeah,
okay,
it's just
that's good to know.
amazing.
Wow.
So it's a super hack. Actually, I told the guys I saw them last night at dinner, and I told them that I stack it.
Wow.
100% agree with you. And the protein is fantastic.
Okay, that's good to know. We'll get more of it. And their skincare is amazing. Amazing. So
I agree. I agree. Yeah. But I must admit, I feel a bit feminine when it comes to using so many different products. Like, for instance, I've been using tallow and tallow at certain times, and tallow lip balm, and the Timeline Tall face cream, which just smells like apparently it's got no scent, but it smells like caramel to me. And it's just like saying to Chris last night, it's just like, I love this stuff so much.
I love it. I love the serum. I love the body stuff. I'm completely hooked on it. So we travel with an extra suitcase, as you know, with all this stuff, because it's ridiculous. But I'm not, when you travel this much, I'm not leaving home without any of these things, especially when you're putting your body under extra stress.
What do you think actually are the best anti-aging foods?
Have you had Kara Fitzgerald on the show yet?
No, not yet.
So I think Kara is probably the single best person to talk to about this. Dr. Kara Fitzgerald, she did younger you. She actually did a study to see if they could reverse, and she did it based on biological age. And, I still kind of look at that and go, I don't know about that. But the thing that she really pointed out that makes a ton of sense is the polyphenols. And really, when you look at it, it's like, what are the foods with the best polyphenols that will help you methylate? So, when I look at this, I think, okay, first of all, you are what you eat 8. I know in our world, there are 2 camps. There is the low protein as you age and the high protein as you age. I don't think high protein is eating 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight or 2 grams per kg. That's, to me, not high protein. Whenever anyone says high protein diet, wouldn't that be like more than 50% of your diet's protein? So I just can't make sense of a low protein diet, like the 10% of your, because it's going to lead to, you're going to have anabolic resistance. It's going to lead to muscle loss. How is that longevity when, as Dr. Gabrielle Line says, muscle is the organ of longevity? How could this be? So it's an obvious disconnect. What I do think is that we don't eat protein all day long and, eat from, the time we wake up to the time we go to bed. We pulse. We eat 2 to 3 meals. We have the time in between. We have our overnight fast. We have mTOR up. We have mTOR down. If you're going to try to keep mTOR down all the time, you're going to wither away to nothing. And exercise increases it too. So, that doesn't make sense. So first is clean protein. And I think this is where, eating, pasture raised and farm grass fed and wild fish. So we get the omega-3s. And I think we should do an omega-3 test too to optimize our omega-3 index. A lot of polyphenols, so all the deep green leafies. That doesn't mean romaine lettuce. That means things like arugula. And it's so funny because now vegetables are controversial, and even fiber is controversial. I'm like, okay. But, I do a lot of deep green leafies, a lot of the sulfur-rich veggies like Brussels and broccoli and cauliflower, and I'll do 2 cups of berries a day. And your berries, by the way, here, kick butt over our berries. We are obsessed with the blackberries and raspberries here. Ours suck. I don't know what you're doing because they're not like weird GMO berries either.
I've noticed this when I was in Texas a few weeks ago and in Miami as well. The berries in Whole Foods look fantastic. And the blueberries taste like a blueberry drink would, like, you know, like slightly fake. They don't. There's something different in the flavour. Over here, they're much more natural, and it's like they're always smaller. In America, they're supersized.
Well, you do not buy any like organic fruit. That's why I looked and went, are these real? Because they must be GMO, because the weird thing, but they're amazing. And then beets, I think, and some of the root vegetables. I don't love them, so I do beets. Beets I like. So getting those ones in for the polyphenols, getting in the right types of fats, but not overeating. Like, that's the other important one, is don't eat too much. And that's where I think we have to do a macro audit, see how many calories we actually do need, make sure we're getting them from the right places. Start by eating protein first, so you're actually satiated and satisfied and you won't overeat. And, and we do dark chocolate. Like, I think dark chocolate's and a little red wine. I know red wine's another big controversial one, but...
actually, Ben and I recorded a few weeks ago, and he talks about microdosing alcohol, how it's a good hormetic stressor, and actually 1 to 2 glasses a day of wine is actually okay for longevity. However, my personal experience is it sets me back too much. It's like my heart rate variability tanks too much. You know?
Yeah, everyone's got their N of 1. Like I do, coffee, red wine, a lot of protein, some berries and some non-starchy vegetables and some olive oil is kind of my diet.
Do you believe in the whole ectomorph, endomorph?
I know it's been debunked, but I got to tell you, I'm a mesomorph. I've always been a mesomorph. My husband's an ectomorph. For him to put on muscle takes a lot. It doesn't. I've always been able to put on muscle fairly easily. And then you have the people that are just like I know that there's no such thing, and you can. But I think there's a way that's easier for someone who's just naturally a leaner, thinner person, someone who's naturally a little rounder, softer. Like some women, their ideal body fat's 25%. And, mine is super low, and it always has been. And I've always been muscular. Like when I was a little kid. And then I met my birth mom when I was 25, and she was the exact same way.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, I know it's been debunked as well, and it's actually quite funny how people say, oh, that's been debunked, it's not real. But the thing is, when you do look at the population, it does seem that there are 3 types. It does really feel like it. And I'd say I'm an ectomorph. And I said to Ben, actually last year at the conference, I said, I'm an ectomorph. He's like, me too, dude. I have to work hard to keep it. And it's so true.
And same with Tim. Tim has to really, and his daughter and son are the same way. And my sons are absolutely like mesomorphs. I mean, it's so I think we all have a tendency. Doesn't mean you can't change it, but it's like, what's your natural, proclivity be, right?
So are there any specific nutrients that are particularly good for looking and feeling young, other than urolithin A?
Other than senolytics and creatine and mitopure. I mean, I think those are, and collagen, right? And omega-3s. I mean, now they're finding all the anabolics about omega-3s. And I knew there was this big hoo-ha about omega-3s and heart disease. I'm like, okay. Yeah. Could we unpack these studies? I think with all of these things, you've got to actually test. I recently did an omega-3 index, and I was where you want to have a 4-to-1, omega-6 to omega-3. I'm so careful about not eating seed oils. And so I was like a 2.5. It's like a little too far on the omega-3 side of things, even though I eat a lot of, beef, and I'm not always eating grass-fed. So,
yeah, it's interesting about the omega, or the fish oils or whatever. It's funny because I've never really been a fan of them. There's something my body just didn't like about them. And then when I looked into them deeper, this is a few years back, realized how oxidized and crappy they are generally.
Yeah, you have to be so careful the ones you buy. Now, I had a son with a severe traumatic brain injury that we brought back, and one of the ways was with 20 grams of fish oil. So if you're getting the right, you have to, this is not one where you go to the the super drug store and buy the cheapest form. You have to buy the TG form. It has to be well preserved. It's got any antioxidants, and there's a lot to it. And it just depends. You may not need it if your diet's dialed. Depends how much fish you eat.
Yeah. Well, so I actually spoke to a lab, not to be mentioned, that tested people for their ratios, and the people that were carnivore, that avoided plants completely, obviously, or pretty much, that avoided seed oils,
We're probably
exercised,
a 2 to 1.
they were literally way out, and it actually showed on the scale of not being healthy at all. And they didn't mention any of the
way off, like too high in the arachidonic acid
exactly
side?
It's like they're just it was actually
because they were only eating meat, not fish, not that would make sense. I mean, when you think about the composition, like meat is higher in arachidonic acid.
And the one thing that I've noticed as well, that, so for instance, I track, obviously, I have a test every 2 weeks of some description, usually, like full blood count, liver enzymes, and cholesterol.
Every 2 weeks.
Yeah, pretty much every 2 weeks. I mean, that's the thing. I like to measure everything, and there's loads of different labs that, want me to test their tests and whatnot.
Nice.
So I'm pretty fortunate like that. One of the things that I've noticed for years is that my cholesterol has always been high, the LDL specifically, and some of my liver enzymes. And my ratios of omegas are out. Since working out and since adding in a clean fish oil, really good one, very expensive, but it's fantastic. My body accepts it easy. And my test results for the first time since I began testing came perfectly into alignment.
Wow. So your body was rejecting rancid fish oil.
Yep.
You can tell if it's rancid. This is gross. If you bite into it. Or if you burp it up, which is, who wants to do that? But
it's definitely with the burping up. Yeah, I mean, I do my dose split twice through the day. With I have a bulletproof coffee or a variant of in the morning, and I have some then, and then after my meal in the evening. And I found it just works perfectly for me, and it's good for cognition as well. I've noticed a significant difference.
Oh, it's a huge thing for brain. Huge.
Yeah,
huge.
I'm glad you mentioned it. In fact, Dr. Dom Nischwitz, he talks about omega oils a lot, part of the whole D3, K2 omega oils.
To me, it's magnesium, D3, K2, omega 3s, and then beyond that, and creatine. Then we start to look at the other things. Like a lot of people, if I'm getting them to start to eat more protein, I'll use protein digestive enzymes for a bit to get their gut going again. So that's another one. But I don't use as many supplements as I used to. I've backed down some. Oh, and the NAD, I'm really kind of...
So it's funny, I have so many people say on my Instagram over the years, why do you supplement? Why do you supplement if you eat clean? It's like, but the thing is
because we're not living on a farm next to an ocean.
With the same level of nutrients in the food.
We've got toxins, what is it? It's like 80,000 different chemicals. Like, this is not the world our body was evolved to deal with.
And if you have a deficiency, you've got to fill it. But to supplement is to supplement by definition. Correct. And yet most people just do it ongoing and ongoing. Like, for instance, there's a test called the Nutrioval by Genova Labs, which are fantastic. I think if there's one test in my whole career, it would be that. But yeah, looking at what's in the cell that isn't in the cell, what should be, what to supplement, what doses and things like that. I think I really love that one personally. And even as a layman, when I first had it, and I didn't really understand the intricacies of all of this stuff and all the down pathways of...
So is a Nutrioval an organic acids test, or is it different?
No. So blood and urine, then they look at the... metabolomics, so the expression of the cell. So it's really, really great. So Genova Labs, kudos for that one. Actually, I think I've done it 5 times now. But it's, in the UK, it's like $600. So it's pretty pricey. So finally, like, how are health foods like diet soda, whole grains, tofu, fat-free yogurt, how are they hurting people?
Yeah, right. That was, so, what's so interesting? That all came up when I first wrote The Virgin Diet and then the Sugar Impact Diet, which my agent was like, you need to write a book on sugar. I'm like, just stop eating it. I don't have a sweet tooth. This book was perfect in the United States when it came out. And all of this work I started doing like 17 years ago. And it was the height of, we'd kind of come through the fat-free time when SnackWells reigned and everyone fat was killing you. But people were doing things like loads of diet sodas and, butter buds and air pop popcorn and the yogurts with the aspartame yogurt, all this stuff, right? That you look at it and go, I remember we have this thing called Expo West in California. It's the biggest health food, supposedly health expo in the world. I remember when I first started going to it, it was like one part of the convention center in Orange County. Now it's the entire convention center plus tents. It's massive. You could never get through it. And the biggest joke is, here it is, the largest gathering of like all these health and wellness brands, and it's all ultra-processed food, posing as health food. Like if you go into places like Whole Foods and you'll see these cookies with agave syrup, you know, and all these canola oil and all this garbage stuff that's just wild, that people think it's posing as health food, so they think it's good for them. When I did the Virgin Diet, I think the real reason it worked, yes, I was seeing all the food sensitivities due to leaky gut. Okay, leaky guts, your gut's getting more permeable than it should be because of gluten, because of stress, because of poor microbiome, antibiotics, that kind of stuff. And food gets out, it's not digested well, it gets out into circulation. Your immune system is right underneath that one layer of your intestinal wall, and boom, you know, starts this reaction to it. But when you really look at what worked well there, if you pull out gluten, dairy, eggs, corn, soy, peanut, sugar, and artificial sweeteners, show me an ultra-processed food you can eat. There are none of them. You can't eat that whole grain, you know, whole wheat sandwich or the whole wheat pasta with the pasta sauce with all the sugar in it, with the fake cheese, the fat-free cheese. Like all the garbage stuff is gone. So basically what that diet forced you to do was eat real food. And people were blown away in such a short amount of time as to what happened. And then they started to connect the dots and recognize, oh, these foods that I'm being told to eat, I'm supposed to eat the soy-based fake meat stuff because somehow it's better for me and better for the planet. How could that possibly be? You know, I mean, let's just look at how it's packaged. How could that be? And all the processing and all the transportation. It's like, come on. So I think they started to go, oh, you eat real food, you save money, you feel better, right? And then I go back and try these things, and all of a sudden my gut hurts, my joints hurt, I'm tired. One gal, she goes, I don't think I'm reacting to it. I didn't notice anything except my weight went up 4 pounds overnight. I'm like, what did it need to tell you besides that? So, you know, I think that we've got to be really careful about marketing.
It's funny you say this. I just want to throw something in there before we wrap up, actually. I recorded with Daniel Amen.
I love Daniel. We've been friends for 25 years.
What a man. And one of the things that he said that really struck with me is, like, for instance, there's a lot of influencers, let's say paid influencers or shills, whatever you want to label them as, that say, oh no, eating processed food is fine, or eating
the dietitians, you mean, that were paid off to do this?
And and you know, you can have Diet Coke because the fake sugar isn't harmful.
Well, that's the study out right now that's showing that you lose the same amount of weight if you drink, or no, you lose more weight drinking a diet soda than regular water. I go, are we looking at what the weight is, and are we looking at the long-term effects, and are we looking at any, like, is it just weight we're looking at, or are we looking at health? Because you can lose weight and be less healthy.
Well, Daniel, he said that on a scan, you can see the difference on the brain when someone eats processed food versus non-processed food. He said, and it is now unequivocally proven that junk food, processed food, ultra-processed food, all of them that fit into that category, damages our brain. And if our brain isn't operating correctly,
nothing is.
Exactly. And that was for me, it's just like when anyone says, no, it's okay to eat processed foods, it is not. It's not food. It's not. It may fill you up, or it's something to pass the time, but it's not giving you nutrients. And it's like, to talk about the calories thing, is like, you know, people say a calorie is a calorie, but it's not.
No, it's not.
The information that's attached to this calorie.
Yeah. I mean, you could say, okay, this is a unit of measurement, and that's a unit of measurement. But that's semantics. That's not what we're talking about. When you eat it, when it goes in your body, it's going to have a different effect. And we know that. Like, ultra-processed food is a lower thermic effect. It's not as, it makes you hungrier. Like, that all has been shown too. So, and then the artificial sweeteners and what they do with lighting up the reward center of the brain. So there is a lot of art, because people will say, well, where's the double-blind placebo? I go, you know what? I'm not waiting for that to catch up and to show me what happens with someone's brain or cancer or anything else. Like, you go ahead.
Well, when they build a bridge, health and safety, mean that I think the stats are that it has to be 3 to 5 times stronger than the weight that it's allowed to carry, because they don't want to risk it. And yet, with the foods and chemicals we're putting in our body, it's the opposite. What's the difference? Industry. And it's like, it just seems insane that we're like, well, actually, we're going to risk it.
Right.
And it's like, and the other thing is that the double-blind study thing, this is actually something I heard a few years ago, and I think it's brilliant. You don't need a double-blind study to prove that banging my head against the wall will hurt me. And yet some people ask for it still.
Yeah.
And
look at aspirin. There's none. There's no studies. Zero. So, I mean, the whole thing, it is the big thing they'll say in the health world. We'll try to do studies on nutrition and putting people in metabolic wards and all this. Some of the stuff we just have to look at and go, what are the pathways? What's obvious? Obviously, drinking pure sparkling spring water is going to be better than drinking a diet soda. If you had to choose between, you want some fizz, because I personally love sparkling water. These are just obvious. Obviously, you should eat butter over margarine. Do we need to have studies for this? Do we need to waste time, money, and funds on this? I mean, when my son was in the hospital and they were like, well, we need more studies, I go, he will die. So I don't really, the risk reward here is fine for me. Like, I just did it behind their backs.
Risk to reward, for sure. And by the way, for those of you that are watching on video, we're actually drinking sparkling water with natural fruit added to it. So it is sparkling water. It's not soda.
There's no aspartame or Splenda in here. Although you guys use a lot of Splenda in your foods over here.
Really?
Yes. We've been at the store searching for things since like Splenda, like trying to find like a ready-made protein drink that he could easily do. And it was like Splenda. We're like,
why don't they use glycine? Tell me this. Like, why don't they use glycine? It's fantastic. It's the perfect sweetener.
I made a sweetener for a while, and that's what I used. It was glycine.
It's fantastic. So I have a herbal tea every night before bed, and I put 4 grams of glycine into it every night. It's fantastic. It's a perfect sweetener.
Or allulose. Allulose is the most amazing sweetener. You know about it, right?
No, so, I know the name, and but I don't use it.
So you know about GLP-1. And, as I've been digging into GLP-1, because I'm so irritated by all the weird anger around and shaming around GLP-1 agonists. And I was like, well, why don't we look at why are we deficient in and what could we do? It turns out allulose, which is a rare sugar that doesn't really get absorbed, doesn't raise insulin, when you take it in a 10 to 15 gram dose, it lowers blood sugar because it releases GLP-1. It's wild.
Wow.
Yep.
So for those of you listening, I just want to drop something in here because, in the US, JJ is obviously known for everything that we've been talking about today and aging powerfully, but also run a Mindshare collaborative. And when you've been in London this week, you ran a group for the first time in the UK.
Yes, we had our first UK Mindshare meetup, which was really cool to do. It reminded me back of starting back in the US when we started, which I never intended to start this group. What happened was I was doing all of this stuff and I was alone and I kept going to marketing conferences. So I was splitting my time between our big health conferences in the US, like A4M and IFM, and then I was going to marketing conferences. And I was at a marketing conference going, how do I grow my business? And they go, well, you should do it with partners. And I go, well, like the partners here, what am I going to do it with the guy who's got a roofing company and the guy who's got like an app company? Like, what are you talking about? And so I realized I need to bring my health friends in. So I started bringing my health friends to the business conferences and having lunches. And then there were so many of us, we started to have it the day after. Then we started to have our own event. Then it got bigger, so I had a mastermind. Then we had all these people that were trying to figure out, I've got a great idea. How do I create a program or a high-ticket offer or do a podcast? So we started training programs. And so it's turned into this whole thing to help people grow and scale their health businesses. A lot of practitioners that are looking to create leveraged income streams, multiple streams of incomes. And it's really the people who are outside of the traditional system. In the U.S., it's like insurance, fee-for-service, that kind of stuff, that have seen the light. They got sick or a family member got sick and they realized what they were doing wasn't working and saw these other ways, but the traditional system didn't allow for them to do that and they couldn't go back, but they didn't know how to make money doing it. So that's what we've been doing.
So it's for practitioners, nutritionists, clinics.
It's a lot of MDs. It's actually what's cool about it is we've got chiropractors, medical doctors, naturopathic physicians, nurse practitioners, nutritionists, trainers, therapists, and different types of health business owners and health entrepreneurs. So we really run the gamut of anyone who's in that health space, and they all come in and collaborate. We've done more podcast, docuseries, New York Times bestselling books, than any other group in health, and really helped create a bunch of 7- and 8-figure businesses.
So, and there's been some incredible stories actually that I've heard about it. So if you're any one of those and you want to scale your business and take on more clients
and not feel lonely,
yes, and be more efficient and not be a busy fool, then you should check out JJ's Mindshare Collaborative. JJ, it has been amazing having you here today. Thank you very much for taking some time out while you're in London.
Sure. It's been amazing being in London. I hope I get to come back.
Yes, I hope so too.
Well, it's up to you. So.
A massive thank you to my friend and guest, JJ Virgin. Learn more over at jjvirgin.com. Follow her on Instagram at jj.virgin and check out her podcast, Well Beyond 40. You've been listening to the Health Optimization Podcast, and I'm Tim Gray. Comment and leave the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel to see more. See you next time, and remember, let's spread the health.